Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Dear Miss T with our very own Terry Ruel. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Boy, September sure flew by. I can't believe it's October already. I imagine you're getting some beautiful colors starting to come out in Michigan, so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still, fall is still really pleasant here. It's not so hot now, so we get the colors a little later. It's a great time to come south, though, because it's maybe 80s and sunny every day, pretty much. So it's a wonderful time to be able to be outside a lot. We're all kind of getting back out from the heat. So last month we were talking about all the things that have been happening in the world and our country the last couple of years, and how disorienting it can be, and how there's just so many issues and challenges. Sometimes we just get overwhelmed and trying to not just shut down from all of it. And how Anne Lamott talked about every night trying to put an octopus to bed. You think you got, all the arms of all the things you're concerned about under the covers, and another one pops out, or, two of them pop back out. So we kind of got into, how we have to kind of de-mythologize, or what's happened is we've had to look at the reality of our systems, and maybe a lot of the idealizing that we had around, all our country and other countries, and how people would respond to crisis, and just looking at, how this has really unfolded, and having to maybe redefine our stories and our purposes. And, that's what a myth is. We talk about de-mythologizing. It's looking at our myths, looking at our stories, because we all create a story around who we are. And that story comes from the first half of our life, at least, usually mostly from our upbringing. And this tricky thing about the stories we tell ourselves, or our myths, is that creates our ego. And so the ego is formed in the early years, and then later on into adolescence and a young adulthood, out of our conscious personal identity, what we are conscious of. So the part of us that is still unconscious or subconscious, we don't have access to unless we start what you might want to call de-mythologizing ourselves, or looking at our stories, our ego, who we think we are, and trying to figure out how much of that is who is our true self, and how much of it is a story we formed because of our upbringing. Dana and I were just talking a little bit about, we all took on roles growing up in our families, depending on how functional and healthy our family was. And, most families, probably, 99%, were somewhat dysfunctional, just because we didn't know what we know now. Parents didn't know a lot about children's emotional needs and wants, and how they were formed. And I got a repairman here early. So if you hear somebody knocking, that's what it is. I'm going to try to send a message that he's early and he'll have to wait till 10:30. So when we're growing up, we can take on different roles of being the overachiever, or Dana, do you want to talk for 1 second? I've got to answer this.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. It's called Keeping It Real here at the Temple Within Radio and Media. And I know for myself, I've really been looking forward to this conversation with Terry because I believe that, well, the last 18 months to 2 years has really given us an opportunity to take another look at ourselves. How do we react in crisis? How do we act in crisis? Who do we become when we've walked through a crisis, whether it's personal or global, like the one that we are, hopefully walking through and wrapping up very shortly with the pandemic. But I do believe that many people, including myself, we've been looking at ourselves and who am I now? And why did I think I was something other than who I really am? And am I the same person I was before the pandemic? Am I the same person I was when I was 5? Am I thinking from my 5-year-old mind, or am I thinking from my 58-year-old mind? And so this entire idea, Terry, of mythology and de-mythologizing is fascinating to me. The other night, Todd and I had a conversation, and I looked at him and I said, honey, who do you think that I am? Who do you perceive me to be? And he looked at me and he said, where's this coming from? And I said, a conversation Terry Ruel is about to have that has really begun my journey into a mythology that I've created or others may have created, and what's really real.
Very good. Very good. And knowing that the stories, the myths that we believe about ourselves, developing our ego, that makes it so it's very hard to see if that's who we totally believe we are. But what we're seeing is only, like I say, the field of consciousness of our personal identity out of what we're conscious of. So anything that we may have repressed, we don't even know is there and is directing a lot of our ego, because that's how a repressed or unhealed or undigested emotions work. They become reactions. And so if we're reacting a lot in life and don't even know it, then we're not really acting out of our true self. We're not seeing the whole person. But we have to form those egos in our life, in our young life, to survive. We have to form a story, a personal identity, to try to, function in the world and try to learn how to navigate. And then usually the second half of life is when we start maybe letting go of that story more and more, or demythologizing ourselves, being willing to look at our whole selves, our whole upbringing, everything that's formed us, including our culture, the generational traumas, all of it, so that we can actually start let going of the parts of the story that were reactions and or were parts of us that weren't allowed to develop because of trauma or dysfunction in the family. We started talking a little bit about roles, and I'm sorry for the interruption. And, every kid takes on a role in their family to function. And oftentimes we talk about the oldest kid being the overachiever, and one of the kids will be often the family caretaker, social worker. One might be the rebel, the one that acts out and carries all the anger in the family. And there can be a lost child, the kid who just kind of tries to stay invisible so as not to cause any more waves. And so, those all become parts of our self as an ego, as a person's sense of self-esteem, as how they contrast themselves with another self in the world. And that becomes your conscious identity, and that becomes your view of yourself. But that doesn't mean that that's your true self or all of yourself. There's parts of that are probably true, but there are also lots of, like I say, parts that were either repressed because somehow growing up in your family, you got the message that those parts weren't okay, which is usually those feelings are not okay, or we don't express those feelings in our family. And we know that children, that's all they are, is a bundle of feelings. So if their feelings do not get validated and allowed to be expressed and encouraged to be and taught how to be expressed appropriately, they don't get to develop their full personality, their full self. So their ego, their story, their myth they're going to believe about who they are is going to be formed around things that are unconscious because they had to push all that down. So, part of what we do with therapy, a big part of it is the demythologizing first of our parents and our family, being able to go back and recognize what was healthy, what was not healthy, how it affected us in healthy ways and how it affected us in unhealthy ways. And it can be a painful but very enlightening process. And in the long run, people usually find the rewards are much worth the struggle of having to deal with all the feelings that come up. So, when we demythologize a country or our parents or systems, that's what we're doing. We're looking for the truths. We're facing our fears and realities about what is really healthy here and what is not, and what is really true and what is not. What is just the persona, maybe the image we're putting out to the world, and what is really the substance, what's really going on inside, and what really is, reactions and unhealed that needs to be looked at. So it really is, when I'm demythologizing myself, I'm looking at the myth or the ego of myself and trying to really work through all the things I believe about myself, I feel about myself, I think about myself, and trying to sort through what's really true. Do you really know what you need, what you want, how you feel? That's what will define you. And can you access your unconscious? Can you access what's been repressed? Or can you start to recognize, how am I reacting and when I'm reacting, and not making a choice out of who I really am, how you really feel, what you really need, what you really want. And, that's, like we say, kind of the second half of life is letting go of the ego and really just being able to start living out of your true self much more authentically and genuinely. But that doesn't happen without self-examination.
So Terry, I have a question about, I can remember when I've always held my grandfather on a pedestal. And I think part of demythologizing comes sometimes when someone falls from grace or falls off their pedestal, right? And I remember the time that I watched my grandfather get really angry at my grandmother, and I had never seen it before. And I was a young girl, and all of a sudden the mythology that I had built around my grandfather being this perfect man came crumbling down. And we can experience that as an 8-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 50-year-old. How do you suggest we deal with those times in our lives when someone's humanity appears and they fall from our perception of grace. Does that make sense?
Yes, oh, definitely. And that's what can be painful about the process of demythologizing, like say our families and others as well as ourselves. It's going to trigger a grief process. And that's why most people, well, maybe I shouldn't say most people, a lot more people are able to and willing to do it now. But for a long time, people didn't want to do therapy because it is a grieving process in the beginning. And a lot of times people are already carrying so much unprocessed and undigested grief because they were told all their life they had to push it down, that the thought of triggering that and going into that just feels overwhelming. But that's what will happen, because whenever we have to, really recognize the truth and see the pain of being human, the suffering that comes from being human, and that human beings can be capable of great cruelty as well as great kindness. It's a very hard thing to have to face, especially about the people we love, because it also triggers that in ourselves. We want to have these heroes and these people that, especially when we're children, that are invincible and protectors and are going to be able to take care of us and are never going to make a mistake that's going to be hurtful. And that's how we mature. And as we become adults, we can handle that, recognizing that. But when children get that, it's much harder for them because they don't have a way to understand that and process that. So if there aren't adults around them that keep, trying to comfort them or help them understand that how they're feeling and know that it's okay to be sad and it's okay to be scared, and that there are other adults here that will take care of you. And it is scary when people get mad, angry. They're going to just push all that down. And, it creates a lot of fear and anxiety. So it's, to me, this was the most vital work we can do, because most of the problems that happen come from people reacting out of their repressed or unconscious wounds. So, doing this work of demythologizing yourself, or being willing to examine our own lives and our own selves, it's what not only will make life worth living for you, but it's going to, that's what's really going to wake us all up, because then we can look at everything. We can look at how much of a challenge it is to be human, and how much we do need each other. And if we don't support each other on our past, that a lot of people won't be able to take it. There's a famous, I think it's Hindu saying, love says I am everything. Wisdom says I am nothing. Between the two, my life flows. And that kind of is a spiritual way to me to look at it, that as you demythologize yourself and you heal the wounds and you find what's in the shadow, what's in all those unconscious places, those parts of me that I had to separate from and push down or break away from to create a story that I could survive with. When I can do that, I can start to finally get to a place where I can let go of my ego or those stories that aren't my authentic self, because I know at a soul level that love knows I am everything, or says I am everything, because we are all connected. We are all part of the one. And so wisdom says, I am nothing, that I don't need this ego because I am part of the one. I'm part of everything. I don't have to separate myself to be something exceptional or special because I already am. I already am everything. So it's kind of that paradox of love says I am everything. Wisdom says I am nothing. And between the two, my life flows. So we start to remember whenever we're challenged that we are all part of this together and that we don't have to be offended or react or reject because we already are everything. And right now, that everything is also being human. You know, being able to accept that we're all capable of every range of human that is possible. We're, because we're human, we're all capable of the continuum of human possibility, the continuum of human emotions, and the continuum of human mistakes, as well as, successes. So the judgment is, we're able to release that. And we're able to see other people for the wounded they are. It doesn't mean that, like I say, we don't set boundaries and people have to be contained if they're violent or hurting other people. But it's a way of really being able to be at peace with the fact that this is all so much bigger than us, and we're all part of the same one. And we aren't going to be able to understand it all on an intellectual level, but as I can let go of having to be separate from the one, I can flow in my life between the love and the wisdom without suffering as much, at least. And that makes us much more available and capable of helping each other.
So Terry, in this, I'm listening to you. I wish this was like an hour-long show, but I know you've got other things to do. But the one question that keeps cropping up is it ever too late? Are we ever too old to change and to really embody or become our demythologized self? Or is it the old adage, I'm too old to change? What you see is what you get.
I think we're never too old to find our true selves. It's just waiting there for us. It wants us. The child, the adolescent in us has been crying out our whole lives. However, we have stopped ourselves from being able to hear it to survive. It's still waiting to be able to show us all the gifts that it holds. And those gifts are only found through being willing to also see the pain that he or she holds. So there's no age limit on our inner child or our inner adolescent or our inner young adult. They're still that age. They have been, and they've been there waiting all this time to be able to hope that we will look at them and be able to bring them into the light and find out, like I say, not only the gifts that they hold, but be able to heal the wounds that they've been carrying that are affecting us, whether we were conscious of them or not. And like I say, we all have some. I mean, we're just still, infants in understanding human nature, human psychology, human emotions. We've come a long way in a couple generations, but we still have a lot to learn. And so every time we do this work, we are contributing to the consciousness of the world and raising the consciousness of the world, because we're bringing more light to all the shadows. So, it's huge what this affects. It's like you'd be amazed, and some of you probably have seen this, even just one person in a family healing, the ripple effect out to that whole family, and how many more it ends up bringing to healing can be immense. And that's what happens in the consciousness of the whole world.
I love this subject. Next month, would you talk about the wisdom of our inner child, our inner youth, and our inner young adult?
Oh, yes, I'll write that down right now.
This is a great conversation, Terry.
Oh, great. I'm so glad it's helpful, because I know, like I say, we are going through really huge, challenging times in so many ways. And that is going to trigger for all of us all kinds of stuff we didn't know was there in our unconscious. There's no way it can't. And it's usually crisis that, brings us to healing, because that's what it takes usually to break through, into the parts of us that we've had to repress. So if we remember that our ego is nothing more than, the myth, the story we have formed about who we are, and we honor that it was important for our survival. And some of it is true, but some of it is incomplete. And because it's only coming from our consciousness, it didn't come from the parts of us that we had to repress or split off from to take care of ourselves. So and that's what creates our shadow, because it's in the repressed part, so we can't see it. So it's not bad. It's just unknown, and it's affecting us, and usually it affects us in unhealthy ways, because we have all these defense mechanisms to try to keep it down, because it's painful at first, like I say, and it is going to cause us to go into a grief process. But that grief process is a healing process, like I say, of taking back all those parts of ourselves and hugging them, loving them, holding them, knowing them, being sad for that they didn't get what they needed. And now I'm going to be able to give them what they need and make myself whole. But there's a sadness in having to accept that at first, but that's an honoring thing. Like all grief is an honoring. This is how much I love you. That's why I'm sad that you had this pain.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What a great conversation, Terry. And I'm glad we get to pick it up next month.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize for the interruption.
That's real life.
It is. And I did try to make sure it wasn't going to happen, but, stuff happens.
That's right. And we just keep moving. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you so much. Have a great month, everybody.
Blessings be, everybody. Get out there and have a great day, and let your light shine as only it can shine. And next month, we will pick up where we left off with Terry Ruel on Dear Miss T. Blessings be.